Yes, list of historic place names. What is that? Why do we have it? What do we do with it? As regards why do we have it, the reason is this. Specifically, the widely held belief that we in Wales are losing place names, and even more specifically, that we're losing Welsh language place names, which obviously make up 90% plus of all place names in Wales. And even more specifically, that Welsh language place names are being replaced by English language place names, and never good ones. They're always rubbish, right? Case in point, on the top left here, we have Mairdre Fach, which is a farm outside Llandysul in Ceredigion. Mairdre essentially means manorial settlement. It is the centre of the township. It is the important place in the cwmwd. It is where you go to pay your taxes and to apologise to the uchelwr for whatever you've done to annoy him. Fach, as we all know, small. So we're describing the Mairdre now. So in that name is encapsulated the history, the heritage, and the land use of the area centuries ago. In this case, it is attested in written sources at least 500 years back. Happy Donkey Hill, conversely. Sure, we're all very pleased for the donkey. In the middle there, we have Plas Glyn Llifon, home of, well, one of the homes of the Watkin Williams Wynn dynasty. Massive landlords in the northwest. My father-in-law is very enthusiastic about telling me that you could step on their land at the border and walk all the way to the coast, the west coast, without ever leaving it. Yeah, big, important people in Welsh history. 2016, the Plas was sold, and it went on the market under the name Wimborne Hall, on the basis that a house with a Welsh name would never sell. So we all know there's not much Welsh spoken of in Caernarfon, is there? You know. Also, of course, those of you with a refined appreciation for the English language will know that Wimborne is wrong anyway. A bourne is a chalky stream. Explain to me the chalk that's in Gwynedd. Not many wimberries there either. Nice Brecconshire example for you all. Pontbren Ddu, down in the bottom middle here. Now, Pontbren Ddu is a house in the middle of nowhere in the wilds of Brecconshire. Right next to the house, there is a footbridge at Pontbren. I am told by the local postman, that it's quite dark. Ddu, right? So Pontbren Ddu tells you precisely what is at the place. Describes the place exactly. All the functions of a place name. However, it is now a holiday home. And obviously, as we all know, tourism is impossible in a country that uses a language other than English. No one here has ever been to France or Spain or Italy, have they? They have no tourist industry. It can't happen. So clearly, Pontbren Ddu wasn't going to work. So the owner decided to call it Little Pudding Cottage. Now, as if this were not annoying enough, as I mentioned, Pontbren Ddu is in the middle of nowhere. And so this is the type of name that appears on the Ordnance Survey maps. So the instant someone changes it from Pontbren Ddu to Little Pudding Cottage, and the OS gets wind of this, what name appears on the map? Little Pudding Cottage. And the thing with names appearing on the OS map is, of course, that the Ordnance Survey are the people who make the official maps for the UK. And so to you and me, and everyone else, if a name is on the Ordnance Survey map, well, that must be the place's name, right? Now, at this point, I have to pause and explain to you all that the Ordnance Survey will tell you that they are not responsible for the official naming of places. They are responsible for the official maps on which names appear, but just the fact that the names are on the official maps doesn't mean that they're official names. And it's not them that chooses them anyway. They just make the maps. Are we all 100% clear on that? Yeah. This is a problem I am having at the moment, can you tell? Painfully close to my house, we have a farm called Bwlch Einion. Now, Bwlch Einion is in Cwm Einion. It is down the valley from Blaen, Einion. The river Einion flows through the valley. About halfway down the valley, there used to be Melin, Einion, since gone. You're getting the point here, aren't you? All the names kind of, what's plethy in English? They all weave into each other. Einion, by the way, could be a personal name, also means anvil. So it could be a reference to the way the water strikes the rocks as it goes down. There's quite a big waterfall at the bottom of the valley. Now, again, tourism. Farmer wanted to open a glamping business. Can't possibly call the place Bwlch Einion, the tourists will explode, so we have mountain sea view. Because, and I quote, well, it's up a mountain and you can see the sea. This is not just a problem that affects house names. On the right there, you can see Dinorwig Quarry. There's been a lot of outcry about this sort of thing recently. Now, when you're quarrying into the side, sorry, I can speak English, I swear to God. When you quarry into the side of the mountain, you do it in levels, right? Ponciau in Welsh. Each ponc had a name. Some of them are named by the quarrymen, some of them are named by the quarry owners. So you have, in some cases, there's a couple of ponciau named after the quarry owners' daughters. You have some named after quarrymen who worked on it. So there's Ponc Robin Rabar, for instance. Nobody's quite sure who he was, but fairly certain he was a quarryman. There are ponciau named after houses that disappeared as the quarry expanded. That's an interesting sort of snapshot. Personal favourite is the one right up at the top of the quarry, which is called Tophet, which is one of the circles of hell from the Bible. Because before you start your 9-hour shift in the quarry, you've got to walk all the way up, and then you've got to walk all the way down. But quarry is now closed, obviously, and it has recently, well, I say recently, over the past 30 years or so, become very popular with climbers. And it is a tradition in the climbing world that if you are the first person to go up a particular route, you get to name the route. Not the rock, not the feature you've climbed up, just the physical route you've taken up it, right? So there shouldn't be a problem, except for the fact that the Ordnance Survey, this is a theme, by the way, have got hold of a bunch of climbers' books and climbers' websites and have decided, right, well, we better, we've got all these blank spaces on the map up in Eryri. I can't have blank spaces on the map. We'll fill them in. Oh, climbers' books. Great. Here's evidence. And so all sorts of new names in English have been appearing on the map of the mountains, including such gems as Mordor, Looning the Tube, and sorry, I have to ask, anyone from England, right? Afterwards, please come and see me and explain what the obsession it is with buttresses. Because every feature in the mountains, something buttress. It's an architectural term. They're not buttresses. I don't understand it, but they're obsessed, the climbers. Anyway, sorry. The point of this story is they're appearing all over the map. And the locals are very annoyed by this because the OS has never thought to ask them what they call things. Now, again, I should explain. The system the Ordnance Survey uses in deciding what names go on the map is what name is in common usage, right? So if we take Llynbochlwyd as an example, Llynbochlwyd has had that name for centuries. The name comes from the story of a hunter going after a stag, and the stag swam through the lake to escape him, and all he could see was the boch lwyd, the grey cheek of the stag over the surface of the waters. Hence the name. Cracking story. However, if you look at Llynbochlwyd on a map and squint rather a lot, it looks slightly like the outline of Australia. And so the tourists have started taking to calling it Lake Australia. Right? Again, fine, daft, not a problem, apart from the fact that so have the Ordnance Survey. Because if you have 200 people living in the valley who call it Llynbochlwyd, and every year 20,000 tourists land on top of them and call it Lake Australia, which name is in common usage? And that's what they work under. Anyway, something had to be done. Something that was done was the Historic Environment Wales Act 2016, recently superseded by the Historic Environment Wales Act 2023. What the Act does is it places a duty on Welsh ministers to curate and maintain a list of historic place names that will function, one, as an interesting historical and research resource, two, as a means of recording Wales's place name heritage for future generations, and three, as a statutory list to be used in the naming and renaming of developments, both in a buildings sense and also things like if NRW want to plant a new wood. It's supposed to use historical names, not just making them up. Should also point out, having talked a lot about Welsh names, making them up in Welsh isn't any better. Right? Drive around housing estates, count how many Bro Dawels you see. Yes? It's a nice name, it's not historic. Now, give you a couple of examples of this. Basically, what this means is that every time there is a new development being built somewhere, the local authority, or as I say, if it's a wood or something, NRW, are supposed to contact me. And either using our data or genuinely to email me and say, look, we're building an estate here. What names have you got in the database? And then I have a look at the map, I see where it is, and I think, right, okay, we've got the names of fields in this area, so we use those, or possibly, the name of the stream that runs through it, or, the name of the house that was there 200 years ago but has since disappeared. And those names are then used to be the names of the streets, or the names of the whole development, that sort of thing, to make sure that they don't just disappear and they're reused. So you can walk along and go, oh, why is it called Fordd Tyddyn-y-Wearan. Tyddyn-y-Wearan was obviously a house that used to be here and has disappeared under the estate. So you can see from the pie chart on the bottom here, got an interesting geographical spread of local authorities coming directly to me. This is just the ones who've emailed and said, can you help us? Theoretically, every local authority in Wales is using this data. Anecdotally, I suspect that there are some who haven't noticed yet. Naming no names. But Powys is in here. And they've been very good recently after I wrote them a very angry letter when they built a new estate on the outskirts of Newtown, named it entirely in English, and none of the names had any historical reference to the area whatsoever. And since then, every time they sort of put two bricks on top of each other, they've contacted me. So writing people angry letters works. Yeah? Now, is this working? You might have seen the news a couple of days ago about Mark Drakeford saying that he wasn't minded to bring in or rather Welsh Government wasn't minded to bring in a law actively making it illegal to change place names. And the reason he gave was based on a piece of research that was recently published. And these are the findings, essentially, because obviously the Happy Donkey Hills and the Little Pudding Cottages and the Mountain Sea Views are all dreadful, but they're headline cases. And actually, the evidence that we've collected suggests that on the ground, it's going the other way. Basically, all across Wales, people want their house to have a name, and they want that name to be in Welsh, irrespective of whether they speak Welsh themselves, irrespective of how strong the language is locally, irrespective of whether they're from Wales originally. So 2018 to 2023, local authorities received 3 times more requests for Welsh language street names than English. In every single area of Wales, Gwynedd to Monmouthshire, the majority of changes to house names are from English to Welsh. It's actually going the other way. There are almost 3 English to Welsh changes for every Welsh to English one. So it is still happening. We are still losing some place names in that respect. Actually, it's going the other way. Quite a lot, what you get is people buying a house thinking, hang on, it's got an English name. It's in the middle of a Welsh village and every other house has a Welsh name. Why is it called Nirvana? That's a real example. What was it called before? It must have had a Welsh name. And so they go looking in our list and they find it. And of course, very important, majority of Welsh people consider Welsh place names to be very important for identity, pride, and nostalgia. Nostalgia is an interesting one. Not quite sure what they mean by that. Ooh, don't you remember when everything here was Welsh? Wasn't it nice? Is that a positive thing? Anyway, the list itself is freely available online for everyone to look at it. This is our website. It is fully bilingual. You can do absolutely everything in Welsh. You can do absolutely everything in English. You can flip merrily between the two. There is a blog, which is theoretically updated once a month. In reality, close your ears, Karina. It's updated whenever I have anything particularly interesting to say and I'm not too busy. Those of you who can read Welsh will realise that there are also bad jokes quite frequently. And those of you who don't speak Welsh will probably find this the most useful individual page. This is our glossary, okay? Because you always get two questions with Welsh place names. One, what does it mean? Two, how do you say it? This is basically our attempt to rectify those two problems. So on the left, we have a list of elements. These are the individual building block words that go up to make place names. So things like tal, pont, bryn, bach, tref, mynydd, mawr, stan, bryn, etc., etc. Translation of the element into English. Then a couple of examples of that element being used in a place name. So you can go, oh, tal plus pont. Oh, talabont. Right, I get it. Awesome. Tal, by the way, flat place. So talabont, flat place by the bridge, which is why there's quite so many of them all around. And on the right, we have a sound file of a fluent Welsh speaker, me, saying the element so that you'll hear how it's pronounced, which does mean, I apologise, that anyone from around here who's trying that will be like, oh, get it right then, I'll try this out. It's going to come out with quite a thick Gwynedd accent. Sorry. You couldn't quite put your finger on where in Gwynedd, but definitely Gwynedd. I've had people tell me they think I'm from Bala. I've had people tell me they think I'm from Llŷn. Asked most recently, was I from Porthmadog? None of those are correct. Anyway, if you click on one of the elements, it will take you to a list showing you every single name we have in the list that contains that element. So if I choose Bwbach, which is a goblin or a bogeyman, as well as an excellent word. So we have Ast Bwbach. Ast is a steep wooden slope. We have Bryn Bwbach. You all know what a bryn is. Cai Bwbach, that's a field. Cai Ffynnon Bwbach. Cai is field, Ffynnon is well. Don't drink the water out of that one. Cai Ffynnon Bwbach. Again, worryingly close to my house. And then if you click on map up at the top there, it will take you to a map, obviously, showing you where all of the Bwbachod live. And if you scroll in and click on one of the pins, it will take you to a screen like this. This is what we call our recorded name page. Okay, we've got one of these for every single name in the list. So I'll tell you here that Twll y Bwbach, which is an excellent example of why you should not translate Welsh place names. Twll y Bwbach sounds quite nice, doesn't it? Twll is whole. Now, we tell you at the bottom here all of the information we have about the name. So I'll tell you what type of name it is. Twll y Bwbach being a house is obviously a settlement. So you have settlement, field, topographical feature, civil parish, other administrative district, so things like cumwats, cantrefs, townships, etc. And unclassified, which is stuff that doesn't really fit into any of those. So bridges, streets, pubs, churches, etc. I'll give you a grid reference. You can find it on a map. Tell you what parish it's in. These are the parishes as they appear on the second edition OS map, circa 1900, which is this lovely map you can see here. This is basically our base map. Throughout, you can flip between this, the modern map, and aerial photography, which we've added recently, which is very nice. tell you what county it's in. These are the pre-1974 historic counties. So obviously in this case, Llywelyn is in Meirionnydd, not Gwynedd. And obviously around here, we're in Breconshire, not Powys. Tells you what date this form of the name was recorded. And the word form is very important there because Llywelyn has quite possibly been spelt any number of different ways over the centuries. And of course, it might not originally have been called Llywelyn. And in fact, it might not be called Llywelyn anymore. And we collect absolutely everything. It gives you the primary source there. These are going to be things like maps, old documents, state catalogues, that sort of thing. People ringing me up and saying, you haven't got my house in your list, here's what its name is. And secondary sources, which are going to be things like, crowdsourcing projects, volumes on the place names of, etc., that sort of thing. Now, stats. Last year, 71,500, give or take, people visited the website, which is pretty good. Had 420 inquiries through the inquiry form. These vary wildly from, oh, could you come and give us a talk, to, my grandparents lived at this house and I can't quite find it. It's in here somewhere. Can you have a look? To a wonderful man in America who is searching for the Holy Grail on the basis of if a personal name appears in a place name and that personal name appears in the Mabinogion, then clearly that place name is named after the character from the Mabinogion. Needless to say, he has not yet found the Holy Grail. Largely, to be fair to the poor man, because I've been very cruel and I haven't told him that it's upstairs in the National Library. It was on display to the public recently. I mean, I really thought he'd have come, but no. And most importantly, not counting the 850 odd that I'm going to be putting in on Monday, we've got 711,825 place names in this. Sounds like a lot, doesn't it? To give you a comparison of just how much of a lot this is, the Irish government has a similar sort of project that's been running for about 15 years now. And at their 10th anniversary, maybe 13 years, at their 10th anniversary, they had a conference in Dublin to celebrate 10 years of their place names database. And they very proudly announced that over those 10 years, 12,000 people had visited their website and they had uploaded 25,000 place names. And then the next speaker stood up and said, hello, I'm from Wales, and we've got 600,000. And they let me leave, which is very nice of them. 1,500 different sources. Those vary wildly. I'll get onto those in a minute. But to give you an idea of sort of the density of coverage we have, on the left here, we've got a heat map, if you like, of where the place names are on a parish by parish basis. So as you can see, there are some gaps. Gwent Levels isn't great. Sort of Eastern Radnorshire could do with a bit more work. Southern Pembrokeshire likewise. It's an annoying Ynys Môn shaped gap. There are firm historical reasons for this. The good people of Ynys Môn do not like to tell you their place names when you turn up and say, hello, we're a big place names project. And they haven't for 400 years. And then on the right, you can see where we've added place names over the last financial year. So as you can see, I have been in Ynys Môn attempting to rectify this. I've also done a lot of work in Eryri National Park and, fair bit in Breconshire. So, sources. First and largest is the tithe maps from the 1840s. Back then, you had to pay money to support the Church of England, irrespective of whether you were Church of England yourself or not. And in order to do this, you had to find out how much land everyone had and what it was worth. So each parish had a map commissioned like this. And this is a really nice example, actually. And as you can see, each field is clearly marked with a number. So as well as the map, you would have the tithe schedule, which would have, the number of the field, the name of the field, who owned it, who was working it, if it wasn't being worked by the owners, how big it was, what type of field it was, and what it was worth to the tithe. And they've been very good here on this example as well. They've also written the names of the farms down, which is very useful. So from this, we got 500,000 field names, which sounds like a lot. But there are gaps. Breconshire is really good. So very pleased to be able to tell you that we are currently sat in Caermawr. This was Caermawr in 1841. Breconshire's great. Glamorgan, one parish, fantastic. Next parish, nothing. Ceredigion, really good coverage, apart from the fact that in quite a lot of places, they just wrote the name of the farm down and they didn't record the individual field names. So you can tell at a glance how much land each farm had, which is interesting, but lost the field names. And in Ynys Môn, after about 4 parishes, they got bored. So we've got almost nothing. Obviously, 500,000 field names is interesting in and of itself, but of course, what sort of thing do you record in field names? Land usage. So, when you have the thing now of, okay, we need to diversify the farms, we need to make sure we're not just relying on a sheep monoculture, and someone turns around and says, yeah, but come on, you can't do anything in Wales except sheep. It's the only thing the land is good for. You can point out, right, well, 140, back in 1840, here you were growing potatoes, here's where you were growing wheat, here's where you're growing rye, here's where you're growing barley, this is where you had that. It's great for that. And of course, charting lost woodlands, because a lot of these fields are actually woods. We then moved on to the 1900 OS, which again, very nice map here. This is where we get most of our individual house names from. So we've got Coeti Mawr there. How do you pronounce that one? C-U-I? Cui? Yeah, awesome. Just, it looks Irish to me. Is that the going? Cui? Yeah, so no, that's not it, is it? Anyway, right. Taliban, Mice Mount, etc. Pub names, things like the Traveller's Rest down there. Names of mills, sometimes you get. Quite often they're just marked mill, so finding the actual names has been interesting. Got about 100. Hello? Yes. Sorry, such is the power of this map that it kills technology. Got about 130,000 names from this. But that's a lot of names. 1900 and 1841 are not very long ago in historical terms, so we wanted to go back further. And one of the first things we did is we got our hands on the database of early place names from the Centre for Advanced Welsh and Celtic Studies in Aberystwyth. And of course, once you get into the early modern period and even more into the medieval period, you're not just dealing with Welsh and English anymore. You've got Latin in the mix, and Anglo-Norman and Anglo-Saxon. So this has been really great to kind of see how place names develop through the different languages. Because the text you can see at the top here, that's a page from the Book of Llandaf, and it's where they list all of the Llandeilos. But of course, they're listing them in Latin. So what does a Latin scribe make of the various Llandeilo names? How do you Latinize those? So that's interesting. The earliest spellings we've got, the earliest names we've got on the list are from the 2nd century AD in Greek. Moridonom and Moridonom, which are both names for Carmarthenshire, means sea fort. Sorry, not Carmarthenshire, Carmarthen. That means sea fort because you can sail that far out the Towey, basically. And all of that allows us to do things like this. So, going on the map, you will quite often see a box with a name in it pointing at a circle with a number in it. There's no box here, helpfully, but Still got the circle with a number in it. These are what we call our head names. So these are the names of, the towns, the cities, the cummuds, the cantrefs, the important areas. And basically, those are the ones where you can, well, historically speaking, those are the ones where you can drill through and see the development. But we've got so much data in this now that you can do this for individual house names as well. So this is Talabont through the centuries, basically. Earliest written record we have somewhere in the 14th century there, Talpont. And then Talabont, 1560, Talabont, 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 until we get down to Talabont on Usk or Talabont ar Uisk to distinguish it from all the other Talabonts. I was in Talabont, Penwethig yesterday. There's one that a friend of mine insists on referring to as Talabont M4, which I think is rather good. We've got something like this, as I mentioned, for every single village and town and cumud and cantref and township in the entire country. Do check it out. Now, we wanted to, again, beef up the sort of medieval place names. So what we did is we went back to the Centre for Advanced Welsh and Celtic Studies, and we got hold of another database they have, which is the database of names mentioned in medieval Welsh poetry. Now, in medieval Wales, the poet was a vitally important figure at court. He was part entertainer and part propagandist. His job was to make sure that Mr. Jones, the patron, was remembered forever, immortalized. And of course, to do this, you need to use a lot of place names, because where did Mr. Jones slaughter his enemies exactly? Which lands did he give to the church because he's a fantastic Christian? What's the name of his house where, there's always the best food and the best drink, and where he coincidentally, Mr. Jones, hint, hint, gives lovely presents to the poets? You need lots of place names. Where did Mr. Jones go on crusade precisely? So there's about, not counting the ones that are in the Middle East and continental Europe, which I did not include. There's about 4,500 names in this database. The database itself is freely available, so if you do want to find out the Welsh for Bordeaux or the Welsh for acre or somewhere, they're all in there. But let's see, it's 132 of these names appear in Breconshire, and of course, sounds obvious to say it, but they're all in Welsh, because I mentioned at the start, a lot of our medieval stuff it's Welsh originally, but it's filtered through Latin. Whereas this is just Welsh, which is really good for making the point that, look, the names are centuries old and haven't changed in a lot of cases. You get the thing of, it was never called that. You're like, actually, it was called that in the 15th century, and look how it's spelt the same. So I am going to risk you all stoning me and point out the fact that Banai Brycheiniog, for instance, obviously Brycheiniog goes back to the 7th century, and Banai occurs since the 15th. Brecon Beacons, Victorian tourist name. That's the difference. I will now run out the back so you can start throwing things. To say, lovely example of this, Llandomas, circa 1400 to circa 1475. We're not sure of the dates of this particular poet, but Llan Thomas, it's essentially unchanged. There was, however, with all this focus on the Middle Ages and the modern stuff, there was something of an early modern gap. So we decided that we'd look at the Parochialia by Edward Llwyd. Edward Llwyd, for those of you who don't know, was one of these brilliant people who was alive in the 17th century who was interested in everything. He was a botanist, a historian, a linguist. He was curator of the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. And as part of this, decided that he was going to write the natural history of Wales. And to do this, he basically sent a questionnaire to every single vicar in Wales. And when I say Wales, in this case, I should point out that I don't mean the clearly defined geographic entity that we know today, because Edward Lloyd was a native Welsh speaker from Oswestry. And these days, of course, technically Oswestry is in England, which is weird because I go there relatively often and you just speak Welsh. And obviously, large parts of Western Herefordshire were Welsh speaking at this time. So it's all of those bits too, right? Now, they didn't all write back. And so some of the correspondence has been lost, but enough survives that it was published in 3 volumes of Archaeologia Cambrensis back in 1908. And essentially, this is what I did during lockdown. You know, other people cooked sourdough and got madly into internet conspiracy theories. I waded through this. It is a wonderful mix of Welsh and Latin and English, sometimes in the same sentence. And the coverage is fascinating because in Meirionnydd and Denbighshire and Flintshire, we've got stuff from pretty much every parish and really in-depth stuff. You know, they go through the questionnaire and Vanol, but in English. No, lost it bit by bit. Anyway, well, they do it good. Sorry. You know, so you get answers for everything. It's like, oh yes, you know, these are the names of the sort of houses of great houses of my district, and these are the people who are living in him. And oh, Mr. Jones there, he owns it by right of his wife, who was the heiress of Mr. Owen, the other end. And it's really, really in depth, and it's great. Brecconshire, we've got quite a bit, as you can see, 174 names. Less so, mostly interestingly, natural features. A lot of river names crop up in this in Brecconshire. Glamorgan, there's something from pretty much everywhere, but it's sparse. It's along the lines of, oh yes, you know, I'm the vicar of wherever, and you know, the 2 villages in my parish are this. Done. You know, they don't get into it as much. Ynys Môn, 1 name. Not because anyone from Ynys Môn bothered to respond, but because someone from, I think, Denbighshire mentioned Roscollin, and that's it. Also put this in, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Study of Brecconshire place names, which is great. Really recommend you should all get a copy of this. There's 2,109 different names. All sorts of interesting, really early stuff. Great piece of research, including fascinating places like Gelli-Feunog, which is obviously of huge significance back in the Middle Ages, and now, as far as I can make out, is a wood. And that's what's great with this kind of thing, because you pick up on all the historical stuff that just isn't there anymore, but obviously was vitally important centuries ago. There's a place near Tywyn in Meirionnydd, which is called Abermenwenfer, or rather, somewhere in the parish was Abermenwenfer. It's a beautiful name. Can't find it. Ask the locals. They don't have a clue. It's gone. But all the stuff in here has been found, so you can actually look at it. Now, forgive me for straying into Gwynedd a bit, but getting back to the loss of place names and the appearance of new names on the map, etc., we've sought to sort of tackle this. And the way we've done that is actually to go into communities all across the national park in partnership with Parc Cenedlaethol Eryri, and sit down and go, okay, what are the names then? What are these places actually called? Real kind of sitting down with the map. Right, you farm here, do you? Excellent. What's the name of this field? What's the name of that field? Oh, there's a stream here. Do you have a name for that? Proper old school community engagement. These are a couple of examples of things we've got. So the map on the far right there was brought in by the bloke who's solemnly pointing at it with me in the picture. He has spent his life wandering the hills around Dyffryn Ogwen and bothering the shepherds, basically, and asking them what they call stuff. And so he brought in his life's work, which is the map on the right there. It's all sorts of features, not mentioned on the OS map, but he's got the names from the shepherds. Brilliant, great, fantastic. That was in our first workshop. Second workshop, someone brings in the map in the middle there. The map of the parishes of Llanllechyd and Llandygau from 1866. Full of names, as you can see. Some of them still to be found on the maps today. Great, right there in use in 1866, brilliant. Loads of them disappeared off the maps. But every single one that had disappeared off the modern maps had been collected by Ian Wynne talking to the shepherds, and they still remembered them. So, you know, not only do we have the kind of proof of, right, this is what they're called today, but here's the historical, they were called this back in 1866 as well. You know, we have people bring in sales catalogues, and one completely insane thing where a bloke turned up on his tractor and said, "Oh, so what are you doing here then?" "Oh, we're collecting place names." "All right. Oh, okay. I'll be back in 5 minutes." Hopped on his tractor and drove off again. Okay, fine. Came back 5 minutes later with a folder under his arm. I said, "Oh, what have you got there?" "Oh, well, it's just a little survey that was done of my parents' farm." "All right, great. Yeah, in 1777. Apparently, back then, they'd owned half of Meirionydd. So every single farm marked, every single field marked, mapped, named, everything. The wealth of stuff you pick up at these is amazing. And the reason I'm mentioning this to you here today is because I am currently in discussions with Banabrycheiniog National Park to do exactly the same thing down here. We're looking to start in 2026. Significant glances around the room, everyone wearing the right colour shirt. So yeah, want to do it here as well. Also opened negotiations with Pembrokeshire. And for those of you sitting and thinking, well, this is great, but actually I know a lot about place names and I don't live in the national park. 2 weeks ago, I was in Sarnai in Ceredigion doing one of these with no partner organisation, just me and the locals, because they wanted to do it. And we had 30 people in the doors. And I've just started a few of the first things they gave me, and I'm already 150 place names in. So might get up to about 1,000 place names off that one. So theoretically, we can do this anywhere. If you can't wait, we've also made it easier to contribute stuff directly. If you're on the website, click on that little icon there that's outlined in red, then click on the feature that you know the name of, so the field or the whatever. It'll give you the grid reference. You then write in that into me using the contact form, grid reference, name of the thing, and a rough date if you know how long it's been called that. You may also have noticed on the news, Welsh Government has launched a new place names collection tool online using Datamap Wales. That will also all come into the list as well. And there's been the response has been kind of like, great lads, who's going to check this and make sure that people aren't making this up? So I can assure you that the person who got that job is me, because I'm not busy enough. So that will also be being checked by me, and then that'll come into this as well. So we've got various ways that you can contribute directly. Now, why is this all quite so important? Well, to get back to our earlier theme, Welsh place names are old. This is just a farm. The name goes back at least 1,000 years. Now, this is the best example of this that I've so far come across in the list, but it's not massively unique. And as we put in more sources, which we're doing all the time, so we're adding up, on average, about 600 new names every month. We're only going to find more things like this. And as you can see, all right, it's Benny in the 11th century. And it goes through sort of Benet and Le Ven Inférieur, because Norman French, etc., and Venivach, etc., until 2024. There it is, it's Venivach Farm. But the name's essentially unchanged for 1,000 years. That's the kind of stuff that we stand to lose if it gets replaced by your Happy Donkey Hills and your Little Pudding Cottages and your Hakuna Matatas. That is another example. So that's why this is important. That's why Welsh Government has made this a statutory thing, which is great, because not just I have a job for life, which is obviously nice, but also this isn't a project that's going to be fantastic for 5 years and then disappear. It's only going to grow. It's going to be there forever. And please use it. Please, tell all your friends. And if you happen to have a survey of your parents' farm from 1777 just sat in your attic, for God's sake, send it in. Diolch yn fawr iawn.